GBNews can confirm that plans to house hundreds of asylum seekers at a former Royal Air Force base next to a North Yorkshire village have been abandoned, not just shelved, completely dropped. It's understood the Ministry of Defence has withdrawn permission for the Home Office to use the base at Linton-on-Ouse. Let's turn to Stephen Woolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen Woolfe, welcome to you. There'll be doubtless cheering up in Linton-on-Ouse. There'll be people thinking we can sell our house again and all the rest of it. But if you're at the Home Office, you're still now scratching your head thinking, well, that was 1,500 asylum seekers. They were going to be kept there relatively cheaply for the taxpayer. Now they'll have to go back to hotels with all the attendant cost.
Oh, absolutely. This is a big victory for the villagers of Linton-on-Ouse, but it'll be a loss for those who will live in other areas of the country. And I guarantee that, as we've seen in Stoke, where there was a huge battle over housing over 1,200 into the city centre, that the northern cities will seem to have the numbers being put into them again. And more than that, Colin, what we're going to see now in the meantime is vast numbers of those people coming across the channel being put in the temporary accommodation of hotels. And as we know, the prices of those hotels are increasing. It looks like it's around £6 million a day, and the Home Office has very little space for anyone to go to.
This isn't much to say for those hotels rather than the RAF base, but I'll say this. In fact, I'll just channel the words of Christine Hamilton, who's my studio guest today, Stephen, and she was simply saying it's a terrible idea when you've got a small village like this in a very rural and relatively isolated area to suddenly have an RAF base there with 1,500 predominantly young men, and it's naive to think that that bad things won't happen or may not happen when you've got people who are bored and listless and waiting for a determination to be made about their asylum status and all the rest of it, with literally the one shop in the village to excite their interest.
That is true, and I do feel for the people of Linton-on-Ouse, as it would do with any village or small town across the country. But what this is also showing, Colin, is that this is exactly what's happening to those working class communities across the country that have had to house them for the past couple of decades. Last year alone, there was 10,555 Iranians come to the country. We now know that 4/10 of all the people arriving in the Channel are from Albania. So we have these big communities from these countries being placed in places across the country, doing exactly what those people in Linton-on-Ouse feared in their towns. And it's about time that we looked at them as well and said their communities are changing, their cultures are being impacted, their lifestyles are being impacted. And the only solution to this now is to ensure that anyone coming to our shores is placed in an offshore centre.
But as we know, it's just so difficult to do with the lawyers on hand trying to stop anybody being flown to Rwanda. But just on the points, the point you made about the 4 out of 10 cross-channel migrants for a 6-week period, according to the Ministry of Defence, coming from Albania, a NATO member country. I mean, that is people exercising. I know there'll be people screaming from the sidelines from from certain political positions saying you can't say that, but they are coming 4 out of 10 from a country that is safe. They are making a lifestyle choice.
Oh, absolutely. And when we also consider that within that data, we're looking at 80% of them are young men between the ages of 18 and 55, that there's very few children being brought over from there. What they're doing is trying to form a beachhead for themselves and their families into the United Kingdom so that other family members can then come across the same routes, make applications to asylum using the ECHR definitions of family life. So what they're trying to do is economic migrants using the asylum system, which was not meant for them. It's entirely wrong. These people should be removed. Otherwise, the whole entirely asylum system now will be seen as useless.
Stephen, is it dangerously racist to make the point, as some of the emails I've seen make, that Britain is not an anti-immigrant country, but it reserves the right, people want to reserve the right to determine where large numbers of people come from. So, for instance, I saw one email saying, delighted to see more Chinese and Indian immigration, maybe more immigration from West Africa, but maybe less keen on Albanian immigration because Albania isn't a country which has inculcated values which sit comfortably with our own. Can we have that conversation, or is it beyond the pale?
No, I think we have to have a conversation of whether certain countries would match the lifestyles, culture and values of the United Kingdom. After all, if you look at the way that we've recently decided that we're effectively banning all Russians from coming to the United Kingdom, that's a value-based argument. But my point about this is it's not necessarily about the countries or the cultures. What we should be looking at is purely the large-scale numbers and whether our country can absorb them, integrate them into our nations and make them part of our British community. I don't think we can do that when we've got such large numbers coming in. We can't house them. And all across our nation, we're seeing huge problems from our community. Yesterday, the discussions about dentistry. We've had NHS issues. We've got issues about criminality, issues about our hospitals and schools. All of those are being impacted at the moment. Large-scale migration is just exacerbating that.
Stephen Woolfe, as ever. Stephen, thanks for your time.